Apex Legends Season 24's weaponry has never seen a change like it has undergone this season. Nearly every weapon has had a major buff in overall damage, and with the reduction of players' total armor, what's viable and what's meta has massively changed. Let's rank every weapon in the meta so you know what to and what not to use. Typically, I don't like to include any weapon in F tier as every weapon in Apex has some viability, but since so many weapon changes have occurred, I decided to include an F tier this time around to help spread out the different power levels of Apex's arsenal. A combo of weapons starts off at the bottom, and it's both the single versions of the P20 and Mozambique. I like to rank these separately from the akimbo versions because you do need to grab one before you get two, and the properties of these guns are different. For the most part, both of these are fine starter weapons, but they will never be competitive with the other weapons above it, and thus, they both work to hold your attachments till you find something better like an R99 or a Massive or an EVA 8. I will say that the range that a single Mozam can do is incredible, and the single P20 actually has a surprisingly decent total damage per mag. D tier contains just a pair of weapons that I deem to be underwhelming. The first is going to be the RE45, and there might never have been a time like now where the RE45 has little to no identity in Apex. It lost hammer points to increase its overall damage output, it doesn't have the same TTK or overall damage potential as an R99, and it's not going to be able to keep up with the majority of close range weaponry, such as a Massive or all those SMGs. The RE45 isn't bad if you want one of the fastest swap to secondaries, but other than this, it really doesn't have much place in the game right now. Second to the RE45 is almost the opposite in function and is the charge rifle. For what it's worth, the charge is an excellent long-range damage farming gun, but it lacks real usability in the close to medium ranges, which is where most engagements are going to be taking place this season, especially with the TTK being so low and all those assault legends pushing everyone down. The charge is also pretty much just a wasted secondary if you really need to perform in a multi-enemy or multi-team engagement. The charge rifle isn't necessarily a bad gun, it just isn't competitive with all the other buffs to the marksman and snipers. All that to the side though, if you are going to go center circle and you're going to post up, you can let this thing rip and farm 4K. In C tier, we have just a few weapons that I deem the rating of fine or okay. The pair of akimbos are at the bottom of this tier, which is kind of odd, but as with many of the lower guns on my list, the buff to the other weapons in the overall meta has made these things kind of struggle a little bit. They aren't bad, but the P20 akimbos lack the true fast time to kill that the SMGs get, not to mention they don't have the same accuracy as an SMG nor the stopping power of shotguns. And as for the Mozams, they had their time in the limelight and they are pretty fair for a secondary, but you'd be better off with any of the other shotguns, and because of this, I don't really think they are competitive in the meta right now. While most weapons had significant buffs this season, our worst energy gun of the lot is the Devotion. The Devotion can be pretty solid once you do get this thing with a purple mag and a barrel, but the recoil is pretty bad at range. In a lot of ways, this hurts its power potential as you would just be better off with an L-Star or a Nemesis. If enemies are close, you would still be better off having an SMG or any shotgun as they are more usable in a fight. Still, the Devotion can be one of the best guns to chunk through enemies if they are all grouped up, as its total damage per mag is pretty great, and once this thing gets revved up, it can absolutely dominate. Now that those few weapons are out of the way, let's talk about some of the good ones I have in B tier. First up is the Alternator. The Alt isn't a terrible gun, but it does lack competitiveness when it does come to pure time to kill. Even with the buffs across the board to damage, it has not changed this. The Alternator is a really great beginner option if you want a simple gun with great damage per mag and is easy to control. It will do you pretty well. It's just not going to beat out the majority of other weapons. If you do get into a close range one-on-one, you would be better off having an R99 or a car. The one thing that the Alternator does have going for it is that it's really great off the drop. It has a great base magazine, and when everyone is stuck at 150 total health, you can drop enemies pretty easily. A weapon that has slipped for me though is the triple take. The TT isn't bad, but since all the other marksman weapons and snipers had buffs as well, the game is going to be in more of their favor. The triple take is another great weapon for beginners where it's so easy to use due to the triple pellet spread, and while it is a marksman, close range flexibility is also pretty decent, almost like a makeshift shotgun. The triple take isn't going to beat out a 30-30 or a G7 in a fight though, and it's also not going to beat out something like a longbow in distance, but that is sometimes okay as having extra flexibility and ease of use is kind of nice. Our second SMG makes the list, and while the Prowler has had better days, it's a really good option right now if you are in need of a larger mag weapon to take on multiple enemies that are pushing you. The Prowler, however, really struggles bad off the drop. The base 20 mag means only 4 bursts and you're going to be out, which greatly makes it struggle. However, even when you do get a blue or purple mag, you are still going to be slightly capped in the overall time to kill compared to the other SMGs. The Prowler is a nice option if you need to split up ammo types or if you are looking to run and gun. Capping off the B tier is going to be our second light machine gun, and it is the Spitfire. The Spitfire is still a really great gun. It's just, once again, there are a lot of better options, which keeps it a little bit lower on my ranking. The Spitfire might just be one of the best options if you are really wanting to run in and completely gun down squads who are grouped up. However, I find that the Spitfire, more so than its competitors, the Rampage or the L-Star or even the R301, kind of requires you to be at a very specific range for it to be more viable than these guns, but also not lose out to something like an SMG if you are too close. We now move into the A tier weapons, but first, drop a like on this video as I appreciate the support, and hop in my community Discord if you want to ask me any questions or find others to play with, as we do have a great community. From here on, basically every weapon we talk about is going to be usable. However, there could be some variations of viability depending on your mode or playstyle. Our first A tier weapon of amazing is the returnee to power this season, the Wingman. Previously Apex's most notorious pistol struggle due to its lack of overall magazine size, but with season 24, you can now put sniper mags back on, which greatly helps its overall output. I will say that you really can't miss any shots if you are outside of the early game, as the TTK of Apex right now is so fast that you will lose out, but for the most part, the Wingman is a pretty reliable early game gun, or something you can use once and again if you do want to run down pubs. Our first assault rifle is up, and it is the Hemlock. The Hemlock right now is still quite amazing, and it's probably one of the better guns when it comes to versatility, as you still have that long range tap firing mixed in with the close range to mid range bursting. The Hemlock just does not pack the same lethality as the other guns above it, and frankly, you should take a Nemesis, as the TTK is going to be better, and you have that accelerator stock to charge your ultimates as well. The Hemlock will come into play if you have two or maybe even one friendly using energy ammo, and you might want to split up your ammo types. Second to the Hemlock is another heavy ammo weapon, and it is the 30-30 repeater. The Peter had a pretty tough time the last few seasons, but right now it is 100% a decent gun that can be viable in a slower environment. Their 30-30 might not be for everyone, since you don't get that full damage output unless you are charging it up, and while I think the G7 is the complement, it is much better, I think the 30-30 might be getting slept on, as it's a pretty good damage farming weapon. Capping out A tier is two snipers, and it's both the Sentinel and the Longbow. I would argue that both of these guns right now have never been better before, other than maybe that season 2 Longbow back in its heyday, but either way, they're both incredible. The Sentinel is an absolute beast to drop enemies if you do charge it up, as you can one-tap anyone with gray armor due to no helmets now. It's also great to apply pressure into late game, since it's virtually a mini Kraber. And as for the Longbow, I actually think I prefer this gun over the Sentinel, and it's been a long time since I have been able to say that. The ease of use is so nice, and with the forgiveness to miss shots, you can honestly two-tap double heady someone and knock them before they even know it. You can also almost drop a blue armored enemy with a headshot body shot combo. Both of these guns are absolutely lethal right now due to the armor changes, and I would suggest that you take full advantage of both of them. As we move into S tier, drop a comment below with which guns that you think need to get buffs or nerfs. I would love to hear your thoughts on the meta. S tier for me are the weapons that are must use and absolutely insane. If I am being honest, there are a ton of guns in S tier or better, as frankly, the faster time to kill opens up a lot more options, which I personally think is pretty awesome this season. I'm gonna start things off by saying that I firmly believe every single care package weapon is an S tier or even God tier. This means we have the Peacekeeper, Havoc, Bochik, and Kraber kicking things off. First and foremost, the Kraber is a one-shot kill to the head again, unless you do have a red helmet, which for me is a huge deal, as it's been a long time since I've ranked this weapon this high because of that lack of one-shot potential in previous seasons. The longer range meta has returned this season, and I also think the Bochik is one of the best guns right now if you can find it, as it does feel like it's pretty rare. That being said, I still don't love that it has ammo issues if you do get it too early on. Thirdly, we got the Peacekeeper returning to the care package for the first time in a while, and frankly, it is absolutely busted. The choke is killer fast. You can hit huge hits at insane ranges, and in close range, it's absolutely lethal. I will say the Peacekeeper is probably the rarest care package gun right now. I've only found it a couple times in about 150 or so games this season. And lastly, we have the Havoc, which I think is probably the best gun in the game, bar none. Select fire means you can pick enemies off at range, or you can just absolutely obliterate enemies who do push in. If you see a care package weapon, it's a pretty simple decision this season. Just take it. Moving to the ground weapons in S tier, we do have the first SMG in this tier, and it is the Car SMG. And while I think the Car lacks in pure time to kill over the R99, the Car has a lot of benefits. For one, it's the tried and true flex gun with either ammo types or either mag types. Second is that it does have the accelerator stock, so if you are pushing on someone like Ash or any of those assault legends, getting knocks and chunking up damage with this thing, it's absolutely great, as it can increase your number of ultimates that you can use, which is huge this season. The Car also saw a slight buff beyond the damage numbers, as it now can take a laser sight, which can be pretty nice if you are running and gunning and hip firing enemies down. The Car's companion weapon in my eyes is going to be R99, so let's talk about that next. The R9 could very well be considered a God tier level weapon for me, but that will take a little bit more time developing the meta of this season. As for now though, if you aren't a shotgun lover, this is probably the #1 option for you. The R9's bump in TTK comboed with the reduction of shields means you can more easily fully one mag enemies. Not only does this mean it's more viable late game, it's also pretty decent off the drop. For me, there might be no better feeling weapon in Apex when you one mag spray someone down from 200 to 0 in lightning speed. And if you are running with an assault legend, this thing becomes even better as it can reload when stowed, which is massive to increase your uptime in fights. Our last and maybe not the best SMG, but the most level-headed, all-around reliable SMG is going to be the Volt. The Volt isn't as competitive as an R9 or as flexible in mag and ammo as a car, but the Volt does bring a very good TTK into a gun that is also very easy to use. You also don't really need that many attachments. This package makes it forgiving for anyone at any skill level. The biggest problem, in my opinion, for the Volt is that it is an energy weapon, and this might mean that you'll have to run double energy, as the Nemesis and L-Star are both great guns that many will want to use this season. Energy ammo is also pretty tough to come by at times, but at least you shouldn't have an issue picking up from enemy death boxes. Just note that a lot of players are trying to get energy, so you could run out pretty frequently. We now have a combo of assault rifles, and the first is the Flatline, my personal favorite weapon in Apex. The Flatline is going to be much better for you if you are running and gunning in something like pubs, but it's also not a terrible choice in ranked. It has more recoil than most weapons in Apex, which does mean you need to be a little bit more of an experienced or better player. What makes the Flatline so special though is its hybrid nature, as you can fry enemies at range and still be very competitive in the close range hipfire. Flatline is a really solid all-around spray weapon if you are looking to switch things up and you need something that is a little bit more formidable while still having some range viability. Second to the Flatline is going to be the R301, and frankly, the R3 today feels so similar as to its power level of about 3 years ago. I truthfully think the R301 is one of the best guns in the game for those who are maybe a little less experienced, as it is crazy easy to use. Getting a purple or a gold mag on it makes it a breeze to one mag enemies or even multiple enemies. The R3 does chunk through ammo, but unlike say a Nemesis and energy ammo, light is generally more readily available due to there being more light ammo weapons in the game, and you can hold more ammo per stack, which is very nice. If you are struggling in Apex, or you just want to take some guesswork out of Apex and you don't really want to focus on your recoil control, you can focus more on the larger picture like your macro and your rotations, the R301 is going to be really good for this. Our last light ammo gun is up, and it is, in my opinion, the premier mid to long range weapon, and it is the G7 Scout. The Scout is an absolute menace right now, as its headshot damage is high, 56, meaning you can almost 3-tap someone down if you hit all headshots, and even beyond this, you can blitz enemies down by spamming them in the body. The accelerator stock means you get more ultimates, and if you want a gun to pick enemies from range and then push up, this is probably the best gun to do it right now. I would say that if you are purely playing ranked Apex, this is probably a gun you need to use, or at least one or two of your teammates should be picking it up. For the end of S tier, we do have a pair of guns, and it's going to be both shotguns, the Mastiff and the EVA 8. Season 23 of Apex saw an insane amount of shotgun use, partially because they were very good, but also partially because the meta of the game with all the support shields and barriers meant players had to peek and jiggle fight non-stop all game long. Season 24 sees the reduction of some of that, so you will have less of a need to feel like you have to run a shotgun, but the Mastiff might be one of the best secondaries in the game if you want something that really doesn't need more than one stack of ammo, and it's going to provide a consistent amount of damage output on enemies. The EVA 8, however, I think is probably the best secondary in the game. The TTK is unbelievably fast, and when everyone is being so aggressive, being able to compete with a gun like the EVA is an absolute must. You will need a little bit more ammo, so it will kind of depend on what you are rocking for a primary, but either preference of these shotguns will both do you quite well. As with every season, I love to put a few weapons in God tier, which I think are the guns that are more or less the best of the best. And the first is maybe a controversial one, but it is the Rampage. The Rampage, out of any of the weapon buffs this season, saw the largest individual damage boost of 4 per bullet. If it sounds small, it really isn't. When a gun like the Rampage has a slow fire rate, large damage per round, and absolutely massive mag size, it means it can honestly perform at basically anything, and this is what the Rampage is. It's a jack of all trades gun. It's almost like a mini 30-30 with its slow fire rate and range potential. It can be close to an R99 when you do charge it up with a thermite, and it can also act a little bit like a Spitfire if enemies are at that perfect range of not too close but also not too far. Did I also mention that if you get a level 3 mag, it can do nearly 1,000+ damage per mag, which is more than enough to kill an entire team not once, but almost 2 times without ever even reloading. Next up is going to be the Nemesis Burst AR. Since the Nemesis came into the game exactly 8 seasons ago, or 2 years ago, it has continually remained a top contender. The Nemesis, in my eyes, is the best all-around assault rifle-like weapon where you want that close to mid-range warlord-like weapon that will just perform. Accelerator stock, again, is a huge deal, and honestly, it doesn't need this to be at the top of the game. It's just an added bonus. Not a ton to say about the Nemesis since it has been the top dog for so long now. I will just say, if you don't like burst guns, you probably should try to get over it, or you can use our next gun, but either way, the Nemesis is probably here to stay. And before our next gun, do you think Apex needs a new weapon? It's now been 2 years since we had a new weapon come to the game. Personally, I would like to see a couple more weapons be added. One thing I'm gonna say is that if our next gun gets nerfed, definitively, I think the Nemesis will take over the meta, but for now, the L-Star is the top dog in Apex. It's been like this for about a season, and even with all the buffs to the weaponry of Apex, the L-Star is as lethal as ever. Easy to control, you almost never need to reload due to the way it functions, its range is great, and its damage is absolutely next level. If you want to spray and pray, this thing absolutely shreds lobbies, and it's the gun that you really can't not pick up this season. Wondering what legends to use? Check out my legend ranking video. Hit that like button, and as always, happy gaming, legends.